So excited for this next segment of the show, talking QB tiers. Jourdan, you may not know this, but no one in the history of the internet had ever ranked quarterbacks before I did with QB index. At least not on a weekly basis. Don't fact check that. Year after year, I was doing it, not doing it anymore. Nobody is doing it better right now before the season in a creative, just all-encompassing way than Mike Sando of The Athletic, who dropped his quarterback tiers on Monday morning, a rare piece of internet content that just everyone waits for and then everyone gets angry at. He talks to a million people from around the league, and you establish what are the quarterback tiers of 2025. I'm going to push back with my own tiers here, Mike, but I am looking forward to hearing everything that you learned over this process.
Well, I love it, and I'm going to put down first. Thanks for having me here. It's been so long since I've seen you guys on Thursday out at Saints camp, but which was great. But I'm going to have another. I've got my results here, and I'm going to keep a column for yours, Greg. I'm going to put them in there, and then we'll just see.
See, I love
this.
This.
Maybe if I have time or afterwards, I'll say you were actually closest to this defensive coordinator or whatever.
Oh.
Maybe you'll be.
I love
see.
it.
I won't name the name, but I'll just see. You'll probably be close to somebody. When I talk to 50, yours will be like someone else's.
Yeah, the name of the game today, Gregg versus Tiers. I mean, I picture, Jon Snow in the epic battle with the broadsword raised against all of the takes from these 50 executives, coaches, GMs, former GMs, league personnel who certainly have takes and shared them with you anonymously here for a group of 50 polled for quarterback tiers. Mike, so thrilled to have you today. So thrilled to be instigating this entire thing. I'm very excited to hear more about your process and about some Gregg takes on the tiers.
Yeah, like back in the day, when I was doing fantasy, I love a good tier. It had a running back column every year, Tiers of Heaven. That would do great business. Let's just get into it. Let's start with your tier one, Mike, and it's Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow tied at the very top of the tier, and then Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Matthew Stafford completing your first tier. What was kind of the most interesting reaction maybe that you heard of those guys getting into your first tier?
Well, all of them, the first four, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson, were like overwhelming. Burrow and Mahomes unanimous, and then Allen and Jackson, I think they got 47 and 46 votes out of 50 in tier one. So no doubt there. I think Stafford was one beforehand. He's highly respected. A lot of people have loved him. But I think when you're getting older and people have kind of been waiting, when's that decline going to come? Certainly he's had some injury issues even in camp. He hasn't practiced. Now this was done before that, but I could have seen people thinking he was a little bit descending, whereas he's 11 straight years in tier two, and he just sort of barely crossed that line. But I thought that was kind of a cool thing in this whole thing that I wasn't, beforehand I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, Mike, it seems like he got some respect from the crowd this year, people that you talked to. I guess I would say what I was surprised about, first of all, is this didn't happen sooner, especially maybe after that 2023 season. I'm more surprised it happened now after, I think anyone who watched it, Stafford himself would agree, this was largely a pretty down season for him back last year. And especially near the end of the season, he turned it on like we know he can in the playoffs. So maybe there's some recency.
Did he though?
Recency bias a little bit.
So, well, I would say this, last year he had 21 votes in tier one, which was a high for him as well. So this year he went to 26. Well, I don't talk to the exact same 50 people, right? There's turnover in the list. So this could just be, hey, I mixed it up a little bit and he got, 5 more votes. And so he was just on the other side of the line. Now he moved over. I don't think this is a universal declaration that he's finally tier one. He just moved across the border. He was close to the border, and I think people rightfully have had him as a high tier two quarterback. So
creaked over to the other side.
I'm reading too much into it.
Go, Gregg.
Like to me, it would be misleading to say that, Lamar Jackson just finally, cracked top tier. No, he overwhelmingly went to the top. Whereas I think that Stafford just sort of, moved. He was living near the border and he moved 2 blocks away, and now he's in a different zip code that's more exclusive. But he's the same guy. That's how I'd see it.
I just disagree that he is the same guy, though. I don't think he was great last year. I think last year, even the narrative didn't make sense. Everyone's like, he picked it up at the end of the year. Did he? He was the weather game in San Francisco wasn't great. Was not great against the Jets. That was week 16.
He played poorly at the end of the year. Playoffs
Right.
was when he picked it up.
Right, but he didn't play well in the Eagles game. The Eagles game, to me, until the very
You
end,
mean in the snow?
was a fiasco. But he had like 4
Yeah, but he had him
turnover-worthy
close.
plays.
I think though he had him on that final drive feeling
Yes.
like, hey, this was really
That's
close
what
to
everyone
happening.
remembers, but I remember the season and the weeks before that. So I'm going to debut my first tier. But first, I do want to have a quote because you do such a good job reporting this out. I don't want these to get lost. You had a quote from a defensive coordinator that said, I guarantee all your ones for Stafford came from offensive coaches. Offensive coaches kiss this guy's ass all the time, especially guys from that system. He's really good, though. I would take him over Herbert because he's a better passer with better timing. Yeah, I get all that, and I just love that quote. So I'm going to put up my tier now, and my tier is the same, except it's one name smaller. Stafford is not in there. Spoiler alert, he's not in my tier 2 either. I think he's coming off of his worst year, and I have a smaller tier 2. I had a little different order. Lamar, just because back-to-back years, I think he's been the best player.
Yeah.
So why not be number 1? Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow, but not a lot of disagreements there. Let's go to your tier 2, which is a massive tier, and it starts with Jaden Daniels. It goes to Herbert, Goff, C.J. Stroud, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, and Brock Purdy. Very interesting where that is where the dividing line is. And we'll get into tier 3, which starts with Kyler Murray. But Jaden at the very top of tier 2, Herbert up next. It's really fascinating. The Goff, Stafford, to think about them too. I had to doing this exercise. CJ Stroud still getting a lot of love. Hurts in the top 10. And then Baker really rising in this exercise. It wraps up with Dak and Jordan. You are loving how high Baker is.
I know. I love this. I'm the captain of the Baker Brigade. I absolutely love that Baker is getting a little respect after one of the best seasons we've ever, if not the best season we've ever seen him play. Yes, erratic at times, but statistically produced and willed that team to win. I agree with those executives and GMs and coaches that you spoke with on that one, Mike. I have to also say, it seems like a nod of respect and an understanding of the situation around CJ Stroud that he retained his tier. What did you pick up from talking to people about him specifically?
Yeah, I think that people did blame more of what was around him and acknowledge that he had receiver injuries. The offensive line obviously was a big issue. Now, he could have handled it better. But I mean, I think last year he had a dozen tier 1 votes. So he goes down to 1 tier 1 vote. Don't think anyone was willing to say he overcame it as well as a tier 1 guy would. But I think it would. Here's one thing about the tiers. I feel like there's like a delayed reaction component to it, where the voters, and at worst, it's people holding onto their priors, but at best, it's not overreacting. It's like, hey, we saw great stuff from CJ Stroud last year. That happened. And there were some things this year. It did. Now, last year, while it doesn't put him in tier 1, like the whole group he didn't get 50 tier 1s, and then this year he gets only 1. That, to me, that would be all over the place. This is like this is a reasoned, hey, we're doing this exercise. I'm not calling anyone for this till after the draft. So we're not doing this like in February 1st when everyone's reacting to the season. You get an off season to kind of think about it and put it in perspective. And so he inched down a little bit, but it wasn't just like a wholesale selling the stock of CJ Stroud. I think people could kind of see what happened.
Yeah, I completely agree with how some of the respondents felt about him. You had a defensive coordinator that pointed out he can carry a team, that he's special because, he can throw from the pocket. He can throw off schedule. He's been good with games on the line. I loved hearing that. And my tiers, I think, loved Stroud even more. So this is where we differ a bit. And we can get into a bunch of different players here. But just for comparison, in the end, By the way, Burrow was like such a solid fourth to me. I don't think he quite belongs with the other three, but I didn't want to separate him. He's obviously so excellent. That's tier 1. So for me, I only had 4 guys in my tier 2 because to me that was where the drop off was for me. Who I would want. I just looked at it like who are the best, who I would want this year. I had Justin Herbert 5th, Jaden Daniels next. You know, I just have to see something bad to believe he'll ever do something bad. Dak Prescott, who if he's on the field, I feel comfortable, is a huge difference maker. And then ultimately, I had the same faith in CJ Stroud that a lot of your respondents did. And I thought there was like a little bit of a drop off just in my heart, Mike Sando, after that. And so that's where I stopped it right there with tier 2.
Yeah.
The quarterbacks Gregg already did not make it into tier 2.
What does that mean? No, that's not true. I'm evaluating them of like what I think it's going to be this year. And I was a little surprised how much Dak got dinged, that I was so much higher than consensus on Dak, for instance.
Well,
but I don't know if anything stands out to you
that's the
about
first
my
thing,
superior tiers.
Thing. Yeah. Dak stands out to me because we forget that in 2023, I mean, he had a really good season. I think he was very high in MVP voting. Was he like second in MVP voting? He was high.
Yes.
I think I saw that on when I looked at it, Pro Football Reference, and it was like, but I think there's also a lot of Dak fatigue that, hey, even if he has a good year, at the end, they're going to be one and done in the playoffs, and he's just not going to do it. And so I actually think it's good that he didn't fall more. I just, that fatigue factor sometimes with a guy who doesn't get over the top, and just like how excited are you about Dak Prescott in any one year? If you've been covering the league a long time.
About the same. Yeah. I mean, I trust him about the same every year.
It's not his fault, though, that he plays for the Cowboys. And I think there's been an element where at times he's helped out by the talent around him. And at times he's overcoming some of the shortcomings of the organization. And I give him a lot of credit. When I look at those 4 guys, for me personally, I'm like, I could put them in almost any situation. And I think they're really elevating it. Whereas the other guys are maybe a little more situation or risk dependent, at least for me.
I buy that too. I think that's not a bad way of thinking. Like, one of the surprises to me was that, Jared Goff moved up and did so well when it would have been really easy to say, oh, guess what? They're losing Ben Johnson, and Sean McVay soured on him earlier. I could have seen people that have not given Goff that much credit over the years having a reason to not give it to him this year, and that didn't happen at all. He got 5 votes in tier 1.
Yeah.
I mean,
also, by the way,
someone
I'm pointing to right now who raised his hand when you. So, Mike, I do want to say I love what you dug up quotes wise about Jared Goff in this tier, because I wondered when I knew kind of you were working toward this and this was going to come out. I wondered if there would be some extra context that people are starting to see with Jared Goff, because he is taking more command of the offense. He's doing more at the line of scrimmage than he did with Sean McVay, and even with the earlier iterations of Ben Johnson. And Mike, I love this quote that you got from an executive. You will see this year if it is the quarterback, or if it is the coordinator or the quarterback, but I think it has been more the quarterback than advertised. And I love that you're getting that nuance now as he's matured, as Jared Goff has matured through his career, because you could very much see that last year.
Yeah. I thought, I'm also curious to see what happens there. Have the Lions peaked in some way? It could be a little harder for him, but I agree. Like, when I was looking up, not that we go with who has the most touchdown passes. He has the most touchdown passes in the league the last 3 years.
Right.
And that's like, if I had asked you that, would you have guessed Goff? I don't know, maybe.
And you have a couple of respondents who believe that, like, look, he is the top of the top.
Yeah.
That he should be in level 1, like you mentioned. And I think one of the notes that I agree with, that Goff and Burrow, one of your head coaches said, are best at anticipation. And from a pure quarterback standpoint, and that is why he went number 1 overall. I do think, like, the comparisons to Joe Montana, like, if you were the very best of Jared Goff, like, I can see that. The reason I had him in the 3rd tier was is that going to work in every system? Maybe that's an unfair way to rank him. You had him 8th. Ultimately, it wasn't too different. Let's just put up my 3rd tier, which is where I went really big. I could even call this 2.5 because by the way that you, evaluate tiers, I think it'd be more 2.5, like in terms of the way.
Oh, he's changing the tiers on us
because you have certain evaluations. This is my 3rd tier, but the way that you said that he's lifting a team or not, this is where I went Hurts, Goff. So that's 9, 10, 11 for Stafford. Brock Purdy. This is where I get Geno in ahead of Baker, Drake May, who I feel very strongly about this year. Tua Tagovailoa, Kyler, and Trevor Lawrence are all one big tier for me. And this is really based on, I actually didn't think Goff and Stafford had as good 2024s as they did in 2023. And Goff didn't have a great playoff game either with the turnover-worthy plays against the Commanders. Everyone kind of, forgets about that. But ultimately, these are guys who are like top 10 type of quarterbacks. I just don't know if they're like changing every single roster that they're on. Stafford to me was more of like he's up some weeks, he's down some weeks.
Mike, I have a Kyler question for you, but first, if you'll just pardon me for just one moment. You are freaking crazy to not at minimum have Matthew Stafford at tier 2. At minimum. You putting him in tier 2.5, I cannot believe you've just done that. Okay, Mike, so Kyler, what was surprising or maybe not surprising that you heard when you were digging up a little bit extra insight about him? He's in your tiers. He is in tier 3. He's at the very top of tier 3. He got mostly tier 3 votes, 1 tier 4 vote, 32 tier 3 votes, 17 tier 2 votes, no tier 1 votes. What did you hear when you were sort of assessing Kyler?
Yeah. I would say a number one theme has just been that he should be better in 2 minutes, and maybe that comes down to some of those close games they do or don't win. I thought that was interesting. I feel like he's been in a little bit of a holding pattern the last few years because of injuries, and so I don't feel like there's a whole bunch of new, fresh on him. One of the things I looked up just doing my own research, one of the concepts I do once or twice a year is I look at the quarterback betrayal index, and that's just basically how much are you betrayed or helped by your defense and special teams? And so, like Kyler Murray over the last 3 years, I believe he's one of 32 quarterbacks with, 25 or more starts, something like that. And he's gotten the worst on an EPA per start basis support from defense special teams. And his offensive production during that time of those, whatever, 32 quarterbacks is like 13th. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's all because of Kyler, but I think that he's somebody who, their inability to win and maybe some of that 2 minute stuff held against him, maybe rightfully so. But like if he didn't have the 32nd best, support defense special teams, maybe he would be one of those guys that has gotten to the playoffs 1 or 2 more times, and maybe he wins one of those games. So I feel like maybe that, as much as anything, could help him be perceived at least as a low 2, because he certainly has a talent to be that.
Yeah, I think his biggest issue is kind of why I knocked Stafford and did knock him down a little bit. I still had him in the top 10 or 11, but that you weren't exactly sure what you're getting from a week-to-week basis, which I think happens a lot with older, great athletes, like even the best of all time. LeBron is in that stage of his career. And I think Stafford had some duds last year that you weren't used to seeing. To me, it was pretty clearly his worst season in about a decade, since a couple of real, lesser seasons. There weren't as many big throws. And that's why I have a lot of faith in him. But when I'm comparing him in this tier to a Hurts or a Goff, it was fascinating to think about Goff versus Stafford, that they're kind of occupying the same space right now. And then I got to the very end of the tier, which to me includes Geno, includes Baker, includes Purdy, includes Kyler. And I want to talk a little about Trevor Lawrence. And if any of those guys kind of finished ahead of the rest of this tier, I personally wouldn't be that surprised. I think if the situations around them, and Kyler, for instance, in the third year of his offense, just gets a little more comfortable, a little more consistent. He's got a good attitude this year. I'm buying the attitude. Then, to me, they're all in roughly the same group where they're providing an advantage, but they're not the top of the top.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. What I liked about some of the intel that you have here, Mike, is that people have talked a lot about the running threat that Kyler does present. Some of these quarterbacks that you have included here in tier 3, similar status, similar benefits to them. They can make plays happen with their legs. They give you an advantage. I also am buying the fact that they're going to ask Kyler to do more designed runs. When I was at Cardinals camp earlier this summer, I saw a lot of those installs going in. So I do very much buy that. It is interesting. You have another second-year player on here who seemed to get a lot of respect from the people that you talk to, your panel of 50, and that's Bo Nix. And I think coming into the season, that's a little that maybe would be have been a little bit surprising to people, but watching him play last season, I'm sure the things that you heard about him maybe matched the tape that you watched, Mike.
Absolutely. Plus, people are optimistic with him in the Sean Payton offense that it's going to be good going forward. So good situation. He had a top, 5-ish defense. But I think that he showed an ability to kind of make plays, on the move and keep his eyes downfield and threaten the defense. Obviously, he's a pretty good runner too. I think people just sort of liked what he was all about. There was really no red flags on him or yeah buts or huge concerns. I think there was a lot of optimism on him. And so when you look at the 2024 quarterback draft class, 6 in the first round, it was pretty interesting that while Caleb Williams was picked number 1 overall, obviously Jaden Daniels is number 1 now of this group, and then it was Bo Nix, and then Drake May, and then Caleb. There's not a lot of separation between Drake May and Caleb, but I think Bo Nix, there was a lot more optimism now than maybe for some people coming into his rookie season.
Let's look at that tier 3 that you're talking about, that Bo Nix is in. It's Kyler at the top of it. Then it's Aaron Rodgers. Tua's down at 17, which I don't think Dolphins fans will love. Trevor Lawrence at 18. Geno, I did like Geno is at least, I wasn't expecting miracles here, but Geno at least was ahead of Bo Nix and Darnold, and then the really young guys, Drake May and Caleb Williams. Staying in this tier for a minute, I couldn't help. I did some scouting on you, Mike. Come up with some Oppo
Love
research. A couple years ago in this very QB tiers, I mean, these geniuses had Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence all but tied as the 7th and 8th best quarterbacks in the league. They also had Deshaun Watson in the same tier as those two guys, coming off one of the worst seasons I've ever seen. It was a half a season for the Browns, but to me, it was pretty obvious. So I think that speaks to your point that maybe they're a little late sometimes to adjust. But at that point, man, they had Trevor up there with Lamar, which even at the time I think was completely insane. There was never a point where I think those two guys should have looked at the same. But there is a little fatigue, I believe, with Trevor Lawrence right now. For him to be down below Aaron Rodgers, I don't even think that's true personally, but he's around the same ranking in my tiers as well. Like, what did you hear about Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah. Well, I think there's definite questions about him and just his consistent accuracy. And another thing that came through for somebody who was so heralded coming out, like, what's his special trait? What's Trevor Lawrence great at? Is there anything? And I think that's a tough question to answer.
It's all things you want him to be great at because of how he's built. That's the thing. He's so big and athletic seeming that you're almost like projecting what you want him to be versus him actually showing up and doing that thing. And scouts, Mike, Greg, scouts fall into this so often when evaluating prospects coming up in the draft, is projecting your want onto somebody who looks the part versus actually thinking they can fit in and do this. Now, the situational things with the organization have not been his fault. They've been a disaster in some cases, but I really think it's interesting. You talked to a former GM who said he hasn't proved that he can take the team up a level or make the team play better than they are. I definitely think Liam Cohen can help him if he is able to be helped. I mean, that said so much to me.
Yeah, it's like Liam Cohen. There's more hope for Liam Cohen than there is for Trevor Lawrence by that quote.
It's crazy.
Now, when you go back, when you go back and take snapshots from the past, I will say in defense of some of the voters, like, Lamar a couple of years ago was coming off injuries and there were questions about him and all of that. And Trevor Lawrence had a good year, so I think there was, there was greater hope for Trevor Lawrence at one point. And I was disappointed last year, not just in him. I know he was hurt, but I just felt like, Doug Peterson wasn't really bringing a lot to this either. So that's where maybe some of the hope with the fresh start with Liam Cohen, who's, obviously isn't overly proven at this stage, but there's some optimism there that maybe maybe they can be a little bit more enterprising overall.
I think that's right, but I also think even though Trevor was coming off a good year, like there was always a little bit of extra projection on him because of who he was coming out, and the accuracy that I love your respondents mentioned has never been there for me. And to me, that's such a basic thing, but he's always just missed way more throws than you expected. Then again, that knock of like, what is his elite trait? They gave that to Gino too. They're like, he's pretty good at everything. Nothing stands out as elite. There's not one X-Men power where you're like, F it, this guy. How about
Oppo research on Gregg, by the way, big Gino guy.
I mean, how about when the entire Seattle offensive line is collapsing and he's throwing a dime with anticipation that you don't even see coming? If nothing else, to me, he pops. If you want to knock him, there's some ups and downs where he's a little too aggressive. But
we are a Geno Smith family.
I kind of liked it. I feel like I kind of like Gino too. Now, some of that is, we love the story. I mean, we love the story of Gino, but Seattle gave up on him. Now I know they have a new regime, and it wasn't Pete Carroll not there anymore. But I feel like Gino, the last couple of years, maybe a year ago, should have been higher than. He's like a 3.0. Yeah. He's like a 3 all the way, and I feel like in a game, all else equal, or go with the guys. I guess go with the guys ahead of him. How many of the guys ahead of him in tiers would you rather have Gino? Let's just say if we're in a close game in the fourth quarter, I'd take him over Trevor Lawrence right now. I'd take him over Tua.
I'd take him over Rodgers.
I'd take him over Rodgers.
I'd take him over Kyler.
Yeah. I would take him. I would take him at the very top of this tier. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Jourdan. Yeah. Jordan's with me.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. I would have no problem with him being a little bit higher than that. So
welcome to the good side,
happen.
Mike.
Yeah, I know you're not the one voting. You're not held responsible. I do want to point out, as I often do, my own progress here. The fact that I've got Baker and Gino right next to each other. Gino was Ed, but like Baker's right there in the top 15. Brock Purdy, I think's gotten better. He fell in your tiers. To me, he improved last year, and I think he deserves to be in that tier too. Let's put up my next tier as well. But to me, Purdy actually, I thought, kind of cemented himself as a real guy that's going to be around for a long time. So I just gave you that long tier that included Purdy. But let's go to my third tier. Eric, the last one was 2.5. It gets confusing.
This is Mike Sando's tier 4 to the listeners and watchers. Gregg has changed the tiers to.
I'm having a 2.5. Yeah. 2.5 is totally screwing me up here.
Okay.
Now I got to put decimal points in the column.
I was
trying. He's taking notes.
All right, for me it's 3 and 4, but I was, you have these evaluations like this kind of quarterback is going to help certain weeks. I wanted to separate it. To me, tiers are naturally wherever you put them, wherever you think there's a drop-off. And I did think there's a little bit of a drop-off. I want to see it again from Bo Nix. I have him ahead of Caleb Williams.
Caleb, Bryce, and Penix are your tier 3s?
Yes, Bo, Caleb, Bryce, and Penix. And they're kind of just like a tier of, I expect them to move up to that 2.5 or what is really the 3, but I just need to see a little more sample size.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's the one area in the tiers where it's a little difficult sometimes is that for me, tier 4 is like either, Russell Wilson-ish, where you're kind of maybe he's not the full season starter anymore, but it's also J.J. McCarthy because we don't have enough info. So some of those things get a little bit skewed, Gotcha. That's fine.
All right, and then Rodgers is the craziest one to me. Put up my tier 4, by the way. We'll do it back to back.
Oh, he has a tier 4. It's not a 3.75.
Oh, yeah, we keep going. I've got Darnold here, which is around the same ranking where you had him, but a tier below because I don't think he has as much long-term promise as those young guys we just mentioned. And then to me, it's Rodgers. It's J.J. McCarthy just because we haven't seen it. Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson. I don't think you want to be going into your season with these guys as your starters. If anything, I'm giving Rodgers too much love. I couldn't believe that he was still 16th last year. And I get the reputation and all, but he's 41, 42 years old, Mike. What did you hear about Rodgers? A guy who really hasn't had a Rodgers-like season in 3 years. He had a bad year with the Packers, then he gets hurt, and then an even worse year with the Jets. To me, the tape to me just didn't support that sort of tier.
No, he got votes in 4 tiers, so let's just face it. Nobody knows what, I think there's a lot of...
Someone put him at the very top? That's crazy.
One person put him in tier 1, 6 put him in tier 4, so... there's a lot of respect that he's earned, over the years, and no one really is signing up to want to play him because, on any one day he's a pain. But I think that, his combination of it, the age, coming off the injury, which is a two-edged sword here because it's bad to be coming off an injury, but he's a year removed from it, so he could be a little bit better with his movement. There's some people banking on that a little bit. But then he reports in June. He has no history with Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator. Questionable cast of receivers in terms of the rapport with him. DK Metcalf certainly talented, but also emotional, and how's that going to go? You know, when Rodgers gives him the brush off, or gives him the icy stare, or gives him the palms up, like when he throws to the place like he wants him to be, and DK's running the other way, and like even Aaron knew he was going to go the other way, but still throw it where he's supposed to be. You know, that's the type of stuff that I just wonder how it's going to go over the course of a season. By the way, now cold weather, tough division, late in the year. What's he going to be at age 41? I think it's all fair.
Yeah, Gregg putting Sam Darnold after the season he had in the upside, along with a declining Aaron Rodgers in the same tier is nasty work, by the way. But I will say that I love this quote that you got about Rodgers. I think this says everything. And frankly, Gregg, it says a lot about why he should be still grouped in with players who are ascending in their career right now, which is too slow to consistently win with his legs, yet his mind and hard count will have your disguise broken and your D-line in the neutral zone multiple times per game. There are these little mental micro advantages that having a guy who has just, first of all, seen that much football, who has played that much football, who knows all of the little technical tricks and all the little things that can get your defense feeling unsettled and a little bit rattled, and maybe is not going to be able to trust his legs and to throw on the move as much. Maybe they're going to play action him more, which he hates to do, but maybe we'll see that a little bit more. So he's in those natural boots versus the out of structure work that we've seen him create with before. But this is so interesting to me that they're sort of understanding this is kind of it where he's at physically, but he still has these little things that will give you edges and advantages at the
ahead of Tua is nasty business. I mean, when Tua's on the field, he's a pretty big difference maker. Maybe the most accurate, quarterback in the NFL. Like no other offense falls apart quite like the Dolphins when he's not on the field. So I do feel like Tua got a little underrated here. We got to wrap it up soon, but we'll just fly up our final tiers. My last tier 5, just kind of the rest of the guys, essentially.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson, Spencer Rattler, Daniel Jones, Joe Flacco. I kind of forgot about Kenny Pickett. You voted him in there. He wouldn't even make that tier for me. And then your final tier is a little bigger. It has Russ. It has, Justin Fields, Penix, McCarthy, Daniel Jones, Joe Flacco, Anthony Richardson, and Rattler. So just the guys at the end. So
where did you have Anthony Richardson? Where did you put him?
He was that tier at the back end of the tier higher, just because I just have a little hope. Yeah. He was at the back end of the Sam Darnold, Rodgers, Fields, Richardson tier.
Just look at this tier for a second.
This is a
look
wild
at this group. This is all over the place.
This is so
One
chaotic.
guy's never played.
This is so
One
chaotic.
guy's never played.
JJ McCarthy.
2 guys are like 4,000 yard passers that are limping around half the time last couple of years.
I think if Kirk Cousins played this year, I would give him a little more pop of the now he's a year removed from injury and actually had some decent film last year.
Rodgers and Richardson in the same one. When Richardson is like the first play,
you broke his brain.
Like in the preseason. How about the lack of recognition by Richardson just gets ear-holed on a totally basic hot?
That's probably a fair point.
And now Rodgers is in the same bucket. Rodgers would have seen that in his sleep, hopefully, at this stage of his career. But yeah, these things get hard.
This is why I won in this tier battle, Sando, is because I added chaos to the mix that broke your brain. I was trying to be, an agent of chaos. That's why I put Stafford and Goff right next to each other, just to make all the Rams and Lions fans mad at each other. Tua and Trevor, all of that.
Off the top, I said you were going to align with one of my voters, but now you're inventing tiers. I think we lost it.
All right, before we let you go, what was the biggest? I know, like you might be surprised about what the votes come in, but what's the most, surprising reaction from fans? Like in terms of where you didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Hurts way too low, according to not just Eagle fans, but some of the people in media, even that I've had conversations with so far today. Yeah, and I just didn't see that coming. I think I understand. I think the voters understand. Good player, but he's got a ton of great stuff around him. They took the ball out of his hands to run it with Barkley because that's in their best interest. And I get the feeling that if he was on a league average team, he'd probably be a little bit lower in this, not
Mm.
higher. I don't think he would necessarily carry them in that way. So I'm fine with where he's at, top 10. He's won a Super Bowl, been to a couple of them. I didn't find this disrespectful, but some people were like, he should be in tier 1.
Mike, have you over the years grown accustomed to bearing the burden of outrage on behalf of protecting all of your voters every single year?
Well, yeah, to some degree, the biggest relief in this thing for me, the battle that I was hated fighting was when Lamar would be at the top of tier 2. And he's like an MVP, and you'd have to get into the nuances of what people are saying. I think now the last couple of years where his production's not only been so good, but clearly he has not been what's holding them back in the playoffs. And I think that was the hard thing earlier, because there's always been a feeling in the league with evidence that, the guys who rely on their legs and are inconsistent passers die in the playoffs, and that's kind of had happened to Lamar. And so the fact that I think he's broken through that's great, because for a couple of years there, it's like, okay, Mike, great job in the tiers. Now, Lamar Jackson's not in tier 1, and then I have to explain that for half the show. I'm done doing that. We didn't even talk about Lamar.
It's still stupid,
and I
though.
love that.
He's behind Burrow. Who are these 3 or 4 guys that aren't putting Jackson and Josh Allen, for what it's worth, in tier 1?
Yeah.
Like,
there are people who think that still
Stupid.
are against too much reliance on the legs, and that's what it is.
It's
There's a few of
stupid.
that, but clearly to me, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are passing well enough now that we don't need to have that discussion. So that's
they're
the
two
one
most like
gone.
efficient passers in the NFL. Like, that's the thing that breaks my brain, is there's
Yeah.
no
Well,
world to me
when
where
you
Joe
have
Burrow's
to-
played
it's
better
di-
than those two.
Yeah. Well, but when you have to pass the ball and they know you're going to pass the ball, it's different than when they're all gearing up to stop the run. That's a fact. And Lamar has done better than that with that.
Get
So,
a man who
I don't
can
have
do
to talk
both.
about it.
I know.
Mike
I said
Sando can
I
do it
just
all.
said we won't make you talk about it, and yet we made
We
you
did.
kind of talk
Yeah,
about
we
it.
did.
It was
I don't
great.
have to anymore.
He's traumatized.
You're done. You're done for the year. We should do this every year. This was
This
a
is
lot
so
of fun.
fun, Mike.
You got me out of the cave and got to do some rankings, which I hadn't done
Yeah.
in a while for quarterbacks. So I appreciate you, Mike. Everyone check out Mike Sando at The Athletic. Look, he doesn't just pop up once a year for quarterback tiers. He's writing weekly. I check out your column every Monday morning.
Mike
One of
Sando's
my
Pick
Six
Six.
column.
my first
Yeah.
things I read on Monday morning is Mike Sando, and does a lot of other great work at The Athletic. Appreciate you, Mike.
Thank you. Love it.